guys, and welcome back to another video. If you've been filming trains for a little bit, you've probably seen a special unit like the one displayed on the screen. Or maybe you've seen a locomotive like this on display. You see, both of those videos are great examples of how the railway tries to preserve its history, which will be the topic of today's video. In the railroad, special paint jobs can be applied to locomotives for many different reasons. Either it be to promote the veterans that serve the country, promote a rebuild program to modernize locomotives, or they can be used to commemorate the older railways that build up the new modern ones. Take this unique locomotive as an example. This locomotive, an SD70 ACE, commemorates the Jersey Central lines. The C&J was formed in 1849 after the consolidation of both the Somerville and Easton Railway and the Elizabethtown and Somerville Railway. The 1071 was painted up in 2012, as well as 19 other locomotives for Norfolk Southern's Heritage Program. Multiple other commemorative paint jobs were featured on different locomotives. For example, here we have the Interstate Heritage Unit number 8105. And then there is that one to commemorate the Savannah and Atlanta Railway. Even after the commemorative program that was over 10 years ago, they still decide to make two more heritage units, those being the Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia, and the Delaware and Hudson Railway. This locomotive, as stated before, commemorates the Delaware and Hudson Railway. This was originally known as the Delaware and Hudson Canal Company, but in the later years, after railways became more popular, they did a name change. Unfortunately, the train experienced an air leak and had to stop in Oneonta. But on the bright side, we got to listen to the nice EMD sounds from the locomotive. Believe it or not, this isn't the first time a locomotive like this would tour the D&H. Earlier this year in April, the Saratoga, Corinth, and Hudson Railway would purchase another RS3 for their collection. It would be poured over to Binghamton with the New York Susquehanna Western, before eventually being taken over by Norfolk Southern and brought to its final destination. This is another way of how companies preserve histories throughout the railways. Instead of pitting up a modern locomotive, they buy older locomotives and sometimes they paint them up in older paint jobs. A great example of this was the Cooperstown and Charlotte Valley Railroad. The Cooperstown and Charlotte Valley Railway is what you would call a heritage railway. In other words, it uses vintage equipment for its own passenger excursions. Sitting on the main line here is a short train that had just finished an excursion earlier today. Here's a bit of a better view of the whole train. There were a few cars that had caught my eye in this small consist. One of them that caught my eye was this old Delaware and Hudson caboose. Cabooses like this one were a standard back in the day. They would be used to inspect the train visually for any problems. Unfortunately, many of these cabooses have been displaced from mainline service because of the use of end-of-train devices. Despite being displaced from mainline service, a handful of companies use them for switching purposes. Another thing that caught my eye were these two coaches. These coaches were more recent additions to the Cooperstown-Charlotte Valley Railway, originating from the Finger Lakes Scenic Railway. These coaches, just like the RS3 from earlier, was delivered by Norfolk Southern. There was some other stuff that was sitting around the area too, such as this old D&H crane. Right beside the coaches, a locomotive was sitting there, that locomotive being an MLW S7. Of course, the CACV also has a few other locomotives, just like these two sitting here. One of them appears to be an old FL9 from the Metro North, and then the other one appears to be another locomotive from MLW. Despite how interesting this rolling stock is, there is some other rolling stock with the CACV reporting mark, and it's just a few miles north from here. This coach is located in the village of Cooperstown. Despite the small village being known for the Baseball Museum of History, it's also got some pretty neat stuff in regards of the railroad history as well, which does include this coach sitting right in front of us, which appears to be from the Delaware and Otsego system. And right next to the coach appears to be a handful of boxcars. The equipment shown here are what are known as static displays. In other words, they stay in one location and don't move. This type of stuff is pretty common, especially in museums. Passing by Otsego is a short manifest train, and it's got something quite special in the rear. On the end of this train are incredibly old, high-level coaches dating back to the Santa Fe. Being built in the mid-50s, these high-level coaches were double-deck coaches utilized by both the Santa Fe and Amtrak. These three coaches specifically were being brought to Connecticut for static display. A lot of the rolling stock shown in this video are either in static display or are actually in operation. Unfortunately, the same thing can't be said for other pieces of rolling stock. Sitting in Cooperstown Junction over here is what looks to be a completely abandoned coach. Not only is the coupler broken and what appears to be rust forming over it, some of the windows appear to be even shattered, with a little bit of some graffiti on the side of the coach, which shows signs of vandalism. The coach isn't the only thing that's sitting here in Cooperstown Junction. There's also a caboose here which is in much better condition. This location specifically has what appears to be a smaller scale museum-like structure. It's even a little sign right by the caboose. Sitting a few hundred yards from the caboose are some pieces of machinery that are really showing their age, which of course are the GG1. These beasts once led passenger trains through the Northeast Corridor, but now they lay silently here in Cooperstown Junction. Unfortunately, the fate of these locomotives is pretty uncertain. What will likely happen is they'll just sit here in Cooperstown Junction for the rest of the time. In conclusion, the railways can preserve heritage through many different ways. Either it be painting up a locomotive in an older livery, using vintage equipment as standard power, or setting it up for static display. Anyways, that will be it for this video. I would like to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.